Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into Bitcoin. It's April 28th, 2025,
hmm
and the price is hovering, well, around $93,773. Just a small dip today, like 0.15%.
Yeah, pretty stable on the day, but the context is pretty dynamic.
Exactly. So our goal here is simple. Cut through the noise, pull out the key insights from recent Bitcoin news. We want you to quickly get a handle on, what's really moving the needle and what the forecasts are saying.
We've looked at market trends, predictions, regulatory stuff, quite a mix.
It feels like a really pivotal moment, doesn't it? You've got economic factors pushing one way, policy another,
Yeah,
all focused on Bitcoin.
it really does. A convergence of forces, you could say.
Okay, well, let's jump into those market trends then. Standard Chartered, they put out some, well, pretty bold calls.
Huh?
$120,000 by the end of Q2, so end of June,
Yeah.
and maybe even $200,000 by the end of this year.
Yeah, those are huge numbers. Really catches your eye.
So what's driving that kind of optimism? Is it just hype, or is there something solid behind it?
Well, the thinking behind it seems to rest on two main pillars. First, you've got this general economic uncertainty floating around.
Right.
That tends to make people look for alternatives, and Bitcoin's definitely on that list. Interestingly, some reports say investors are starting to prefer it even over like traditional U.S. treasuries.
That is interesting. Over treasuries. Okay, what's the second pillar?
That's the institutional money. We're still seeing, big firms, investment funds gradually putting more capital into Bitcoin that provides a sort of steady underlying demand.
And we're seeing some results already, right? Bitcoin's bounced back pretty well from that low point earlier in April. About, what, 25% up?
Yeah, roughly. And like you said earlier, it's not happening in isolation. The stock market's been a bit shaky. The dollar's weakened a bit. That all kind of helps Bitcoin look more attractive, relatively speaking.
Makes sense. So it's part Bitcoin-specific factors, part broader market environment.
Exactly. And on the technical side, analysts are seeing some bullish signs in the charts. The big level everyone's watching now is $100,000.
Ah, the psychological $100 K mark.
Right. If it can break through that level and stay above it, that could really open the door for another significant move higher. It's a key resistance point.
Okay, fascinating. Now let's shift gears a bit because this regulatory angle is, well, pretty major. President Trump signed an executive order back in March establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Yeah, that was a big development, a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
That sounds very deliberate. What's the thinking there? What's the goal?
The stated aim is pretty ambitious, actually. They want to position the U.S. as the, quote, crypto capital of the world.
Wow, okay.
So creating this national reserve is a concrete step. It signals that the government isn't just watching from the sidelines, but actively engaging.
Mhm.
And interestingly, they're funding it with Bitcoin the Treasury already has, from forfeitures and things like that.
So they're not necessarily buying new Bitcoin on the open market for this, at least initially.
That seems to be the plan for starting it,
Yeah.
using existing holdings. It's a strong signal, regardless, a commitment.
And this kind of pro-crypto stance from the administration,
Hmm.
is it having ripple effects? Are we seeing more activity in the sector because of it?
It certainly seems that way. The sources we looked at mentioned companies like 21 Capital, for example, gearing up for potentially significant M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions.
Right.
And
M&A.
that kind of thing usually reflects growing confidence within an industry. People are more willing to invest, to consolidate when they feel the regulatory environment is becoming more favorable or at least clearer.
So it's like the government action is giving a green light or is a yellow light for businesses to move forward.
Something like that, yeah. It reduces some of the uncertainty that might have held companies back before.
Okay, so let's try and tie this together. We have these optimistic forecasts, right? Driven by things like economic jitters, pushing people to alternatives, plus more big money, institutional money coming in.
Mhm.
And then layered on top of that, we have a U.S. administration seemingly taking a much more supportive stance with things like this strategic reserve.
That's a good summary. You've got demand drivers on one side and potentially lower regulatory friction or even encouragement on the other.
It really does feel like those forces could work together, maybe create a cycle pushing prices higher.
It's certainly plausible that synergy, macroeconomic factors, boosting demand, and policy making the space more attractive could indeed be quite powerful for Bitcoin's valuation in the near term.
Right. So for you listening, what's the main takeaway here? Despite the little daily wobble, the bigger picture, the forecasts, the underlying drivers, they seem to point towards significant potential upside for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it's not just based on, hope. It's tied to real economic shifts and these important regulatory moves, especially in the US.
Which leads us to, I guess, the final thought for you to chew on.
Mm. How is this interplay, this dance between the economy and government actions going to ultimately shape Bitcoin? Not just its price tomorrow, but its fundamental role, its adoption, in the whole global financial system down the line.
That's the big question, isn't it? How
hmm
deep does this go?
Exactly. It's a really dynamic situation. Watching how those economic trends and regulatory decisions continue to influence each other, that's going to be key if you're navigating this space. Something to keep a close eye on.